Welcome to those of you here. Thank you for joining us. And as I say, sorry for the poor IT set start. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Charlotte Fisher. I'm the road running manager at England Athletics. But just before I introduce our guest speakers, just to let you know that we've got recording this session. So if you want to go back at any stage, or you've got colleagues or fellow race directors who want to have a look at it, they can do. If you're new to the webinars, obviously you should be able to see our slides, which will come up in a moment, and also our speakers, which we might be a little bit in and out. We should have this chat function at the bottom, which obviously most of you have found out at the moment. And for the second part of the session, I have the opportunity to ask questions to Tom and Barry. So hopefully Barry will be back with us in a moment. Just to introduce Tom whilst we're waiting. I mean, obviously these are, it's been said many times, unusual times, and clearly, far from ideal to be back in lockdown again. But part of today was, about sharing some of the positive stories, in terms of event providers who've put on stuff and been brave enough to give it a go in the last few weeks and months. So I'm delighted we've got both on.
Barry, can you hear us?
I can hear you now, yeah.
Can you turn your volume down a little bit?
Yeah.
After trying to get your volume on, we've been now telling you to turn it down.
I know, how's that?
Great, thank you. Yeah, so, obviously delighted to have these guys with us, and, it's been great to see, what people have been able to do in terms of putting on events in difficult times. And clearly there's lots and lots of learning going on across the board. But delighted that these guys are prepared to sort of share with us, what they did, what they tried out, what worked, what didn't work, perhaps, and be, and to be open around that, sharing it with us. And hopefully, as we come out of this, it will give some ideas and some solutions and to your own events. Obviously, each of you have got unique, different setups, but hopefully today we'll provide a few ideas around both some of the practical things that Barry and Tom did, but also perhaps some of the processes when dealing with your different event providers. So really what we're going to do is these guys are going to present probably about 15 minutes each, all being well, and then we'll open it up for questions. Gavin Lightwood from Run Britain, I should say, is in the background, and Gavin will be tapping away in the chat box should you have any sort of guidance, licensing specific questions, but we'll focus the live questions and answers around Tom and Barry and their events, so you can glean as much from them during this session as possible. So if those questions come to you as you go through, feel free to put them in the chat box. I'm just going to go across to the presentations now, which we would have set up earlier if it hadn't been for the IT, so just bear with me for a moment. We had a lovely run through on Thursday and everything works wonderfully. But
yeah, nothing went wrong on Thursday. So
exactly, that's where it goes.
It'll be all right on the night.
As they say.
It was absolutely perfect at that stage.
I'm going to mute myself.
Okay, so so we've got Barry Hopkins from Sporting Events UK and Tom Bedford from Runfest, Richmond Runfest. Their events were the Four Castles events, which was based down in the Dover, Kent area that Barry runs, and obviously Tom put on the recent Kew Gardens 10K. Two very different events, different distances, different challenges, and probably some slightly different approaches, as well as some shared approaches as well. So really excited to have these guys sharing with us today. Barry's going to kick off. Barry, if you need your videos, you'll just see them in the menu box as we did on Thursdays. You can just drop in there. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Barry now, and you'll be in his hands for the next few minutes.
Right, I'll just get the right slides up for you. Ah. So what we approached a whole series of events, because we've actually put on 6 or 7 events since the COVID secure guidelines have taken place, one of them being the Four Castles Challenge, which we'll come on to in just a second. So I thought it'd be useful if we looked at what we had to do to get the events back up and running again. Our first event was actually the 2nd of August, and as you know, Run Britain, Gavin and the team gave the go-ahead from the 1st of August, so we were pretty quick out the starting blocks. A lot of that was based on prep work that we'd done leading up to it. So you need to obviously consider your route. There might be changes that you need to make to the route. Incorporated into that is obviously the layout of the race HQ and the race village, considering both the participants' arrival and exit from the event. So that might mean that you need to change some of the things that you do. If it's an event that you've done year in, year out, again, you might have to change something. So you need to be really flexible and really evaluate from the beginning any changes that you might need to make. The events that we've put on so far, which is slightly different to Tom when it comes to Tom later on, is they've been in public spaces. So we haven't had a closed park for those events. So you need to obviously look at the impact on the local residents as well. And within that, analysing the number of participants, which often means a reduction in the overall numbers with the start-finish arrangements. What I'll do as well with the start-finish arrangements is attempt to show you, here we go, we implemented a new starting system. So our starting system is quite different to the normal, in as much as that it is staggered, which obviously you need to do. We've only got 2 minutes gap in between each of our waves, and we've been having 30 to 40 people per wave. So what you'll see, hopefully from this video, is over on the right hand side you can see people hanging around and standing around. They're not being called forward to their wave. The athletes you can see running or walking through the start area have been called forward for their wave. Where we're quite different to the normal is that there's no hold sequence, which enables us to put a greater number of people through the waves. So literally you can see they're just walking through as far as the start mats, and as soon as they reach the start mats, they're off, and you can see the distances in between. But by not having a hold sequence, we can obviously put more people through at the same time, and you can see the social distancing there works really, really well. So obviously within the start there, you can see a lot more people could go through. That's scalable up to several thousand if you need to. I think at that race we had 13 waves of a similar size. But obviously early communication is key with landowners, local authorities and key stakeholders to make sure that they understand what's going on and they're happy with all of your proposals. A firm but considered stance is needed with those. We have had, which we'll come on to shortly, 1 or 2 issues with local authorities in a few places, but you need to be sure in what you're saying and what you understand. They're not the experts, you're the experts, you know the regulations, so don't be afraid to come back to them on any points that you're challenged on, but you need to be clear and concise with that and ready to negotiate. So in terms of what you need, all your usual event paperwork is needed, management plans, risk assessments, all those typical event paperwork, which I'm sure lots of you are familiar with. You will also need a COVID risk assessment. Ours isn't exhaustive, it's fairly simple, straightforward to the point, and a COVID management plan. Now we sit our COVID management plan alongside the regular event plan. So that way it's specific to the COVID measures, and that walks through, for the purposes of the authorities, exactly how the event works. So what happens when people arrive? Where do they go to? Where do they stand? And at the end of that, we include a site plan, which just shows exactly where everything is laid out, which you will need to do. So somewhere where the start is, where's your wave holding area? Where's your socially distanced space? How do they access the start area? How do they leave the finish area? Is there any other particular points that you need highlighting within your site plan at the start or the finish? We also send them a comprehensive set of COVID protocols and procedures. Within that, we've linked that to the government legislation and the protocols and the tiers and the alert levels, so that the authorities can easily see within that what is included. So it references back to what was signed off by the Department of Culture, Media and Sport and the Run Britain guidelines. You'll obviously need to give your detailed event staff and volunteer briefing documents. That needs to be very clear. A lot of races thrive, and I know there'll be a lot of clubs on this call, thrive off volunteers, but you need to make sure that they're fully briefed. We also have an online briefing document. We use Jotform for ours, which is an online tool which you can sign up to. We email that out to everyone, and they have to read it. They also e-sign it in advance with a COVID declaration, and we won't let them run until they've done that, but that's easy to track. So thinking of the Four Castles Challenge, a lot of the issues that we highlighted were in this one, to be honest. So it's a half marathon visiting 4 castles along the route. It's a half marathon. As we say, the route is open to the public during the event and is a mix of on-road and off-road sections. So to give you an idea, so we've got castles like this, as you can see, with public roads, public footpaths around them, public seafronts next to them as well. So as you saw from that, it's a very public space. So a few of the challenges that we had during that process. So the challenges, we had to obviously get local authority approval. Now this particular local authority also has a corporate protection department. So the normal event notification process now has an extra layer involved with it. Because it's in a council-owned space, i.e. public land, they have to approve it before it goes through the event process. So it does mean that the event process is longer than normal. So we needed their approval. We had multiple landowners on the route. So there was the council, there were some local farmers, there was National Trust, and there was English Heritage. So a little bit of a nightmare, to be honest, in some respects. National Trust threw us a bit of a googly about 2.5 weeks before the event when they refused permission to go across their land. So we had to redraw 3 miles of the route, which was certainly a challenge. There are some insurmountable challenges in terms of permissions like that, but we just had to think laterally and make some alterations to the route. The local authority challenged the number of people in the wave. So it was just after Boris had made his announcement about 6 in a group, and they came back to us and said, well, 6 is the number that's been approved. You're talking about 30 or 40 per wave. So we actually went back to them and said, well, 6 is for general gatherings, but this is a COVID risk assessed, COVID secure event that is part of organised sport. So actually you're wrong, and this will work. We also sent them a longer version of the video, which you just saw, with the start arrangements. And you have to remember that you're the experts, not them. They're generalists. They don't necessarily know how a running event works. So you need to be able to explain to them how that works. They did agree with us. So you don't have to get sort of difficult with them. You just have to be robust and defend your position and make sure you highlight stuff to them. As we say, National Trust refused the position. English Heritage were amazing. They were supportive throughout the whole process, which was great because we couldn't have done it without them. We were restricted on the numbers. We were starting by a peer, so we could only have a certain number of people in that space, which made it somewhat tricky because you've got public walking along there, you've got cyclists, you've got dog walkers, as well as our start-finish. So it was interesting, to say the least. We were also restricted by the amount of people that we could have within the castle. That seemed to work okay. There were a number of narrow spots on the course where there were about 2 or 3 narrow spots where we had no overtaking zones. We used signage for that, and people were, again, very good with that. Within our race HQs, we were sorry, I'm just seeing a message that someone's not getting anything, so apologies. Hopefully the rest of you can hear me. We also make the people wear face masks in the race HQ area when they pick up all of their stuff. And uniquely, we actually give them their medals and their T-shirts in advance of the race. So when they arrive, they have to show photo ID. They collect their race packs at that point rather than before. Sending them out in advance, they collect it on the day. Reduces the amount of contacts that there are. We have hand wash stations there as well. We have queuing systems in place as well. So it's quite a comprehensive setup, really. The interesting one has been the medals. We've had quite a few people say to us they wait to look at their medal and they get it at the end. They actually don't look at it until they're finished. We also had coach, because it's a point-to-point race, we had coach transfers, so we had to speak to the coach company. We provided the drivers with masks in case the runners didn't have those. And again, it's thinking of all the eventualities and all the ins and outs of everything. But it actually worked really, really well. It was really successful. We did get a few people push back public-wise, but literally only a couple. Most people were broadly supportive. You can see just here some of the feedback that we had from a couple of the COVID secure events that we've operated. I know the fear of some organisers is how will the runners react to it. They've all been really supportive. They've all got on board with the regulations. They've all got on board with what we've asked them to do. Obviously, we don't have water on a 10K or shorter now, half marathon. We just have one halfway round, but it all seems to work really well. So I think I'm passing on to Tom now. I think we're doing the questions more towards the end. So Tom, if you're there.
Thanks, Barry. That's great. Lots of questions coming in, but we'll pick those up later on following Tom's presentation. I'm sure there'll be some parallel questions as well. But thanks for that, Barry. That's great. Over to you, Tom. Your slides should follow on actually from Barry's. So just got the function at the bottom. And you can
Brilliant, brilliant. Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? Waiting for any comments. There we go. Brilliant. Hi, everyone. My name's Tom Bedford. We organise the Richmond Run Fest, which in normal circumstances would be 5K, 10K, half, full marathon music festival over a weekend. Last year, we celebrated having 10,000 finishes over a weekend. Yeah, looking forward to having an interesting 2020, but wow, things changed. We would normally have, as I said, 10,000 spectators, but we would also have, probably 10,000 runners, but we'd also have 10,000 spectators. So it was a massive change to us for it this year. And I think the parts of what I'm going to go into, and some might have seen a similar presentation that I've done before, is sort of just looking at how we sort of personally approached it without getting too much into the guidelines. I've got in my notes here, we were realistic to start off with. So our venue is Kew Gardens, which is London's, I think, second biggest tourist attraction. And they have been back online since the 1st of June. So it's technically a private park, like a Richmond Park, a Royal Park and such, but completely walled. People would normally pay £15 to enter for it. It's absolutely beautiful. So we felt as though we had a really good chance to get this going. So we were sort of looking at all the guidance, and as they came on, I was on Gavin's, giving Gavin a call every week, saying where are we with guidance. We were ready to rock and roll. But one of our main things actually came from Kew Gardens. So we had to make a decision quite early of how we were going to approach it. As I said, we'd normally have our half marathon and full marathon. Even though they start in Kew Gardens, they exit onto public towpath for areas, and our finish line is in a completely different area where we commute bags from the start to finish. So we sort of had to have a look at it, and we decided that we had to be realistic with it. So this meant that we had to do a lot of culling. First one, sadly, is spectators. That was quite easy. They're not really paying to be there anyway, so I'd actually quite be happy to do that in normal circumstances anyway. I'm only joking. But yeah, we did that. We tried to be realistic with what we would do from a participant side. So we started off, we spoke with Q, and we decided a 50% reduction would be a smart start interest for us. And we actually looked at it because we had a weekend program. We said, well, listen, maybe we would normally do a 10K on the Saturday and then a half and full on the Sunday. So if we're not doing the half and full, then let's push to do 2 10Ks and have that over the weekend once we've got all our infrastructure in place. Normally we would have 4,000 people, up to 4,000. It's 3,950. But so we decided to, let's work on 2,000 as a figure to go for. Quite interestingly, because we've been selling entries, our Saturday was pretty much full from that. And we only got that clearance from a variety of places, from Kew specifically, for the Sunday event to go ahead 3 weeks before, 3.5 weeks before the event. So we were actually in a situation where we had 2,000 runners all signed up for the, maybe it was 2,200 already signed up for that Saturday, and then 0 runners on the Sunday, which is quite an uneven way to do it. So we had to go to our runners and ask them to flip across. And try and spread out. No one wants their first day happening with their busiest. So yeah, we looked at that and went for 2 10Ks. We had to completely rip up the course, and the best way to start off with it, we actually had four complete different start lines. And we almost had to start from an access and regress. And the biggest thing that I saw from our point of view, with 2,000 runners turning up, and even though we're asking spectators not to turn up, you just know that they'll be dropping off, etc. so we had to look at that and had to completely change it. And we almost looked at, from an access regress for 2,000 runners, we had to look at it like almost like nightclubs or pubs or restaurants would create a sort of capacity in terms of a fire capacity, in terms of how many entrants, what's the surface area. We sort of spent maybe a little bit too much money on looking at our course in terms of what can the course handle from a 2 meters apart. So we spent a bit more money on that. I think if I was doing it again, you don't really have to do that. I think, once we knew, we sort of knew, but we spent a couple of grand on that, which I'd probably trying to do it in a different way. But essentially, you're looking at a full surface area for the whole of your course. We're a 10K, so that's easy. It's 10 kilometers. But you're then looking at what's the size of the width of your paths, we looked at it in terms of where were the pinch points as well. On there as well. So that was the course, but you have to do it for everything. So it was an access and regress through the whole thing. If I actually get up a map here, there we go. So this will show it a little bit more from an access point of view. I haven't got, you can't see my mouse, but if you look at the top right-hand corner, this is a sort of public, that Kew Green area is a public road. Ferry Lane is owned by Kew. So we sort of we had security guards at the front of here and only let people in with race numbers. There were a couple of other entry points that we had to block off with volunteers to stop sort of general public coming in. It's a road as well, so we had traffic marshals obviously stopping cars from going in there. But you can see here from Ferry Lane, this was the first entrance, and you can see it, the yellow area there. So we try to break down. Again, you've got to look at your course and see the advantages, disadvantages that you can get from it. And people have got varying different courses here, but we sort of found as though it almost looked, we almost broke this down into a canal sort of area. We broke different areas into a section. So we've got the yellow section here, we've got a pink section here, a little purple section, which is more of just a walk through, small path, an orange section, a blue section, a pink section, and a grey section. If you sort of, the best analogy that I used for this was thinking of these as canal locks. So we had security guards at the front and at the end of it, of each section, all in communication with each other through areas. So if we were sort of getting overloaded at certain areas, we have the ability to sort of stop the valve, stop the lock, and stop people from pushing on the problem to the next, the volume further down the line. So that's how we broke up our event for this amount of runners. And I think one of the biggest key things that we did was, what doesn't help us, and again, we've got varying different sizes on this group here, but we're sort of covered under mass gatherings. We're a mass participation, and the mass doesn't really help us, okay? And I don't think it defines us in a proper way as a music concert would, where you've almost got to think of a music concert. We've almost got a dead end. You get people in, they go to a stage, and then they come back out. And that's the the access and regress of that event. The one thing that I tried to do was break down that definition with Kew Gardens, with public health, with anyone that we shared it with, because in their mind, when they're thinking of our running events, they're thinking of a London Marathon. They're thinking of 20 minutes of people going through the start line, all huddled together. It looks like chaos. We had to break that down and say, well, listen, we are not an event of 2,000 people. We are a movement, a throughput. Which was not a term that I came up with. Mesh, our health and safety officer, came up with, and it's true, right? It's a throughput of people. They all come in. So we broke our runners down into 400 people, and that 400 people is before a dropout rate. So this is the worst case scenario, and you can see here in the table that what we've got. So you've got your yellow Ferry Lane here, the red Brentford car park. You can see here sort of our maximum socially distanced capacity, which essentially is pi times the surface area, or sorry, the surface area divided by pi, which is I failed maths quite badly, so 3 point whatever. But we looked at it from that point of view. So you could we were sort of describing each area and say, well, actually, if this was a nightclub and we had to fill up everyone, the maximum that we could have with the surface area in this case was 2,000. Thank you, Roy Reader. Of course, you get that, Roy Reader, the accountant. We would have 2,100 people. Now, we would never ever try and do 2,100 people, but we're sort of trying to break down to people of how big and how well we can do it. And all we're trying to do is fit 400 people here. So our capacity is 400 people. So all our runners were told to turn up at different times. Are they going to turn up at different times? You know, and I know they're not. Half of them probably won't even read the instructions, so we've got to take that into consideration. But we sort of explained that we had various things that we could deal with that. Again, with stopping and starting people. Our security guards at the top of Ferry Lane can only let certain colours, so we broke our runners down into 5 batches of different colours, so red, yellow, green. So it made it simple for our volunteers and security guards to only let certain people in at certain times. To be honest with you, for people that did turn up really early, we've got enough room in our orange area and the rest of queue, which isn't even sort of highlighted there. So we can actually get people through our process, because I think one of the biggest things that we had was the start of the race. I was quite confident that after the race, after people have been spread out over 6 miles, we could deal with that. So let's deal with the toilets, which we all know get nailed at the start of the race. Let's deal with everyone turning up 20 minutes before the start of the race. So how can we deal with these different sections? So in our yellow section here, so we had 400 people turning up in our yellow section here. Near the end of this yellow section, we had toilets, which was probably, I think, just roughly speaking, with the same amount as what we would have before to reduce the quays. So extra costs there for the toilets, but we knew that we would not be in a situation, and our volunteers would not be in a situation with dealing with manageable queues from a toilet point of view. We asked all our runners to, and let's just stay with the 400 runners that have turned up first for the second. They then moved into the red section here where we had baggage. Listen, I'm not going to get into issues. I'll let Gavin deal with, remember there's guidance and there's guidelines here. We really tried hard, and I was quite honest with Gavin, and I was quite honest with Dave Clark, our Run Britain adjudicator. Listen, we're going to try and, we need baggage, because there are going to be people that are going to turn up without baggage, and we don't have a car park here where, so people have come and we're going to have to deal with baggage. So we've either got to deal with it in a COVID secure and the best way possible, or we're just going to be, what are we going to do with them? So we've got to be realistic about that. So in the red section here, we had our baggage tents, shed load of baggage tents. I could have probably done with half of them, because we told all our runners, please can you not turn up with baggage, and they actually listened for once. So that was really good. The runners really helped us out there. No queues, all of our queues obviously 2 meters apart, volunteers looking after that, trying to keep people apart there. So our 400 people who have come in through the yellow section have gone into our red section. And if you look at the runner capacity here, when our runners are in the red section here, we're then saying to Q, Public Health, the local council, well, we're now letting in another 400 runners into our yellow section. So let's fast forward, because otherwise I'll be here all day. But if we move into the next slant here, we've now moved our first 400 runners. You can see the time at the top left here. So if I went up again, 7:30, 7:45, and I felt this was a great way for us to break this down, that we're not 2,000 people aren't turning up at once. We're dealing with a throughput of people. We also use the analogy of a train station. A train station isn't Waterloo Station isn't a, you know, I don't know what the figure is, 250, 300,000 people all hitting it at once. You've got 1,000 people per train arriving at different times and exiting in different times and entering at different times. So you've got to try and break that down for people who just think of everyone turning up and dealing with them as a mass. So we're at 7:45 now. We've got the 100 people, if you're looking at the box, 100 people in the walkway. We've got 200 people in the orange area, which was a certain holding zone, and at each area, only certain bibs that we broke down into faster runners would be able to get into first, the next section. Think of it like a VIP wristband, okay, in terms of us dealing with that. And as we progress, we're at 7:45 here. Let's progress on, because I think I'm sure you've got the idea by now. But at 8 o'clock, we've now got 500 people in our Blue Banks lawn. That was quite interesting, actually, because one of our biggest problems that we're trying to, as you can see from the pass and the sort of the path that we're using, look at the purple, look at the blue section there, you know, that yes, we've got to deal with moving people, but we've also got pinch points, even with the access and regress. So we had to be wary of that. And once we got them into the blue section, we decided to line people up rather than just have a mass group. We line people up like people would enter or get on a ferry. If you're in a car on a ferry, if you can remember and think back, you're put into lines of cars, and then they'll enter one line at a time, and you wouldn't get in that car park and just have loads of people just heading towards the exit. It would just be chaos. So that's what we did with our runners. We herded them that way and put them in lines, and then looked after them in lines. And if we go into the pink section, we took 2 lines at a time. They came round, and then the grey area, and I'll show you a video in a second of our start line, but the grey area, we had 4 lines of people 2 meters apart onto the start line. So if I move on one more here, you'll sort of get the idea. 8:15, we've now, oh geez, my memory, yes, this is just before the start of our race, so everyone's at the start line. So we've got 200 people in our grey area, all socially distanced. You can see it's a big area, but we're really protecting ourselves at the front. 400 could only be fit in 2 meters apart in our pink area, 800 in our blue area, 100 and everything else. And as the race goes on into the next section, we then 200 people were going through, 100 people, let's just call it 100 people, we're going through the start line every minute or something like that. So we've now got a release, just like a train station. You can see there, 10 minutes at the top left, 10 minutes into the race, 840 people we calculated were on the course. So once the race started, we're actually in a better situation, because our volume of people entering the race is getting less and less, and there should be more space and everything else. And as long as we're in control of it the whole way through, that's better there. And you can see the idea. And our finish line, actually, and it's very difficult for me to show it on here, but there's a path underneath the purple section and the orange section, the White Peaks Cafe. There's a sort of diagonal path, and the runners actually came back around and finished there. Sorry, I didn't draw that on. But yeah, we then had a situation as the runners would exit that way, and then they would be leaving through the purple into the red, into the yellow, and then exit. No spectators. Spectators could meet them queue green up at the top as they exit there. So as the race goes on, I think you've got the point now, in and out, in and out, in and out. And that's where we were there. If I go onto the video, let me just show you, if I do this right, 1 second. Video, was that at the top? Let me have a look. Here we go. Is this a video or is this just a picture? Thank you, whoever did that. I'll press play now, and here's our video. So this is our start line, 4 people across. Let me just pause that for a second. Hopefully that works. But yeah, you've seen the picture before. We used these orange discs on the floor, were like 50p each, and we bought them from like a school supply centre. I've got a shed load that I can rent out because hopefully we're not going to be using them for too much longer, for another year maybe. But we decided to use these yellow-orange discs on the floor that showed people, just like in a normal shop situation, the 2 meters, and we're telling runners to stand on these discs, so people have a good understanding of what it is. If I carry on here, and you'll see our start line video in just a second. So we did it slightly differently. So we had people lined up and then sort of released them, and they would walk to the line and move it. Now, I probably need to digest it. What I wanted to do is almost have my event happen, and I can go and watch all of your races and see how you guys do it. But it was sort of the only way that I could sort of figure it, and that we're in control of it. So I've seen Barry's as well, and Barry's works just as fine. We did it like this. I haven't really got an opinion at the moment in terms of would I do that exactly the same thing. There were issues where we were a little bit slower, which would have had a knock-on effect, but also it did work. And, you know, I think we were on the Saturday, we were 5 minutes over what we calculated, which wasn't the worst thing in the world. And we had that sort of planned system. If I come back to the presentation, or if someone's in control of my presentation, if I go down to the pictures there, I have no idea where I'm timing. I talk a lot, so apologies. Do cut in if I am there. I've just got some notes here, and I'll try and rush through them. We were private property, and I saw a sort of question there, which helped us. It massively helped us, because we were sort of saying, thank you, we were sort of saying that Kew Gardens is open, and I think Kew Gardens had a capacity, and they said they had a capacity of a surface area of 10,000 people throughout a whole day. They broke their entrances into different sections. So we were quite confident that we were able to do that. So we were showing why that would not make a difference there. So we were quite, you know, if Kew Gardens wasn't shut down on a normal day, why is this? Once we've got guidance, we're doing this. And public health, we reached out to them. I don't know what they're like at the moment, but I know that for Kew are trying to put on their new event now. I hope they don't mind me sort of saying it, and public health are very strict on it, but I think we're going into that sort of different tiered section now. But we were in touch with them the whole time. Whether they actually got in touch with us, some of the junior person read it early. So my advice would be get it into them early, because the worst case for us, all of us putting on an event, is if it gets pulled lastminute.com. Because we paid for the hotels, we paid for your vehicles, we paid for staff deposits and everything else. So if trust me, okay, get in touch with them early. They will be reading everything. You know, this is not the year to sort of say, oh well, we can use last year's. This is a year to use your risk assessment, have your COVID assessment there, have a COVID officer who knows what he's doing. We were very lucky. We had Mesh, who is a really good health and safety officer. I think he costs £250 a day, roughly. I'm just trying to help you out, sort of thing. That was easy, because we had public health that came in on the day. They assessed us all. I had an email at 6 o'clock the night before saying, we're going to shut you down if what you're saying is not controlled. They all turned up. We had our health and safety officer who walked through the whole process with them. Toilets, baggage. We were using Virusol on baggage once that was put in. Loads of things. And I think if you go on our website, you can see what we've told the public, and you can get some tips from that point of view. Charlotte, I'm looking up. Have I gone over?
Yeah. No, that's brilliant. That's about perfect, and it leaves about 15 minutes to run through some questions. So I can see quite a few questions coming up, and I know you guys have already answered some of them, but I'll go into the Q&A now, and we'll pick out as many of these as we can, and hopefully provide a bit of answers on those as well. So let's see.
Cool. I think there's quite a few questions there
I'm
beforehand.
just trying. This should appear on the.
There's a question here from Victoria that I'll just start whilst people are going to re-enter the things about the extra costs. Listen, we broke even. Oh, there we go. We broke even. Sorry, Barry. We broke even from the event. We go into next year possibly in a better situation, because we've moved some runners, so we're not having to put on next year's events and we can't accept any more runners. I'm accepting the social distancing to be with us for a little while, so our plans for next year's events are all based on social distance, whether this vaccine arrives or not. I think socially distant stuff, I'm not going to speak for Gavin or anything else like that, but I think we've got to go into 2021 now thinking that social distance is going to be with us until we're in a much better situation. We spent a shed load of money on disinfectant. We had what are they called?
Sanitizer.
Sanitizer, thank you. We've got a whole lockup of sanitizer left over, and we had that every 300, 200 meters, that on a little table, 2 pots there. We had Virusol, which we put over the bags whilst the runners were out there. A load of PPE, even though not proper PPE, but all of our volunteers that were dealing with runners on a face-to-face. Yeah, there were lots of costs. I think I've calculated it, that we spent for an event of our size, £1,500, I think is the rough idea on that. But some of that stuff we can use for next year as well, so it's not completely spent up there. Barry, I'll let you.
I mean, we found, yes, you do spend some more money. We won't go over the same ground that you did there, Tom, but also one of the issues was because there's less people that you can have at the event, it does make it slightly difficult with that. Because you've got a lower revenue stream coming up. Thank
you, guys.
The other bit was, is it all passed on to the runners on higher entry fees? Well, both of us weren't in a situation where we could suddenly increase entry fees. We were already had our runners entered. I think we've probably got to be realistic in that, if all of our events are going to cost more money, and we're doing them properly to the guidelines and everything else, then at some point, either we've got to take it on the chin and you hold it, or you're going to have to pass it on to the runners. Let's wait and see what the economy is doing. There might be a bit of inflation coming up over the next years, so I think generally, future is going to be increased entry fees, but that's just speculative. Sorry.
I can see that question from Peter there about was it a problem that athletics and running is not listed among team sports? No, because we weren't referring to it in that way. We were referring it as an organised sports event, nothing to do with team sports.
And funny enough, our local council, hopefully they're not listening, you've got to think of it from a local council. They have got so many of these different guidelines, right? They've got it for cinemas, pubs, bars, restaurants, theatres and everything else. And my local authority had actually looked at it and actually had looked at the athletics guidance. And they've actually read through the whole athletics guidance, and they're talking about, 10 people per race and everything else. And we're saying, no, running's a completely different thing. Run Britain issue our guidance. Here it is. Let's have a look at it. So, you've got to give local local authorities a bit of help with it, because they've got so many of these guidances that are coming in that they're not going to be up to date with anything that's new as well. That's the only thing I know.
Yeah, we actually found it useful to quote some of it to them and just send them some short extracts which highlighted to them. We actually sent them a link to the road running section on England Athletics bulletins as well. So go back and challenge them.
How did you deal with the test and trace? We haven't had anything confirmed from our event coming back to us.
No, we didn't either.
Yeah, and maybe being a little bit, again, my opinion only, I'm not sure we've got the greatest track and trace system in place anyway, and I think a lot of their focus is probably more on families and dealing with work environments. If they did look at this section, then there would be some serious things. But we prepared in our plans, was speaking to public health and actually explaining what we would do in this situation. We've got lots of positive things that we can actually say to public health. We've got timing mats. We know when this person's been over the start line, so we can actually narrow it down to maybe a 10-minute window of people arriving. We could work with that person who's tested positive. What time did you arrive? Well, we know that you would have probably dealt with this person at this time, you finished at this time, and you would have exited. So do remember, compared to some events, we've actually got a massive advantage in terms of dealing with people who have turned up, what time they've turned up, what time do they start the race. So do mention that and do let people know, because that is one thing that we've got from timing.
I mean, you're right in that question there, that the areas can be reclassified as a different tier at short notice. If you think back to the tier 2 and the tier 3, which was medium and high, I think it was, there was very little difference in the actual guidance to road running on that. Because we operate in multiple authorities, we potentially face that situation. The only time that changed was in the very high, where very high, the geographic restrictions were a slight issue with that. But it's probably unlikely to affect you unless, I guess, if you're in the north of England, possibly. We're in the southeast, so I suppose we're a little bit more protected. But I think we had protocols and procedures already drafted which covered all of the government alert levels and tiers, so that if we needed to change it, we'd already logged that stuff with the local authorities. So then we would change, and we say, if the guidance changed and we went from tier 2 to tier 3 or medium to very high, then this set of protocols would automatically be applied. So do the groundwork first would be my advice.
Nothing to add there. That's a good explanation. What did your health and safety officer advisor say about storage of hand sanitizer? Is it class? Good question. Drop me an email. I'll give my email at tom@richmondrunningfestival.com. Drop me an email on that and I'll ask him. Good question.
Yeah, I didn't have that one. For us, I don't know about you, Tom, on this one, we allocated runners. We've always collected the predicted finish time as part of our registration anyway, so we make it a compulsory field when they're registering. So wave 1 contained the fastest people, and then the final wave contained the slowest people. That also added to the race experience and made it less time trial based. Because whatever happens, you're racing people of a similar ability. It also reduces overtaking, particularly in the early stages of the race. Whether you're doing, we've done as short as 5K in this, and it works for all distances. So it really works. And a lot of the runners, not sure if one of the quotes that I put up said they actually prefer this starting system to the normal. It's much more chilled, it's much more relaxed, but it still feels like a race because you're with people of a similar ability.
The only thing I'll add to that is, yes, we did exactly the same thing. From a planning, and again, this throughput of people, I used, I love my analogies, I used an analogy of if we've got faster runners at the front and the slower runners at the back, we know it's going to be all over the place with people not necessarily knowing the times that they're going to do. But think of it like an elastic band. So as the race started, it thinned out over 6 miles. That's really positive in terms of you talking about your surface area, okay? And so once the race starts, as I mentioned it when I went through the thing, at the start of the race, that's the worst situation we can be in as an event, because as soon as the race starts, all the runners are going to thin out, okay, and the surface area expands dramatically. So do have that in your planning and explain it to people that, yes, there will be people running and lots of space with reduced space at certain pits, but we've got an elastic band and it'll get thinner and thinner. The faster runners will get faster and faster, and the slower runners will do what they do. So that helps as well with planning and explaining some things.
Yeah, because what you need to remember is that the faster runners, because you've got the faster ones in front of the slower runners, the gaps only increase because the pace per mile of the faster runners is that much quicker than the slower. So the distances get greater the longer the race. So
I think this was just for me. So the pink area, and funny enough, on the Sunday, my old man who was looking after the start changed it, and my amazing start crew. One thing I didn't mention actually, but let me just say that while I'm reminded, reach out to local running. I know we're all sort of rivals and we feel as though we're rivals and competitors, but reach out to local race organisers, timing companies and everything else. So I think Mark Thomas is here. We've got 2 other guys, Peter and Roy, who we're all technically rival. We put on races in local areas. get them down to your event and get them to help and achieve really good, look after certain sections for you, because they're going to make decisions that you're going to make and you can't be anywhere. So Mark Thomas came down, who's a timing company, not the timing company we use. He came down and helped our start crew deal with this. Sorry for just butting in that. The pink area, we had to get the surface area as much as possible. So we sort of had that just to gain a bit more surface area. The pink area was, these were files of 2 people. There we go, anywhere there, perfect. So these were files of 2 people. So this path was 4 meters, so we could only get 2 people in. So we had 2 lines of 2. Sorry, I haven't got a photo of this. If someone wants a photo of that, I can do it, send me an email. But as they came down, the runners went towards Kew Green and turned back and came back on themselves. The path, the broadwalk path there is massive. It's 10+ meters. So we had cones and it was separating. So we weren't having people walking directly past. We had enough room there. On the Saturday, we did that. On the Sunday, I think our start crew did it slightly differently, and they just had them coming out is the pink, and then they went right into 4. So they went from 2 lines in the pink into 4 in the grey area there.
I did see a question earlier on that said about guidance and whether medals and T-shirts were not allowed. There's nothing in the guidance that says you can't do that. Someone asked that earlier. You just have to think about where it's doing, because what you don't want at the finish is everyone stopping to pick up a medal and a T-shirt. So you have to be more creative. We gave them at the start, but there's nothing that says you cannot give them a medal.
Yeah, and all our goodie bags we had goodie bags. All our goodie bags were pre-made. Again, in COVID situations, when you're doing all your preparation for the event, my advice would be to take some videos, take some pictures. So we had students packing our bags. We had videos throughout the day showing them in PPE, hand sanitizer available. Okay, so if there was any situation, we've got it covered, okay, and you've got examples of what you're trying to do as well. But yeah, we even gave out water on the course, which I know the guidance doesn't advise, but we've also got to be realistic. Our event, I didn't feel comfortable from a health and safety point of view, putting people out there who are going to be an hour and a half on a 10K race if it was really hot. I didn't feel comfortable if they didn't have any water themselves. So, yes, it is guidance. We sort of did what we did. But, people wouldn't pick up that water, and our goodie bags were picked up from a pile. They weren't handed with volunteers giving them out, sort of thing. So there are ways to get around it. You've just got to really do things differently.
Guys, thank you very much for your time. I'm very conscious that we're on the hour there, and I'm aware that there are still quite a number of questions that come in. I think what I'll do, I'll try and collate some of these, and maybe behind the scenes we can add some answers, and I can send that out as a circular at a later date.
Charlotte, I don't know what Barry's like. I'm happy to go on for another 15 minutes if that would be easier.
I can continue and answer some more questions, not a problem to me.
I think it helps all of us. The more events that we can get back going, as long as you're okay with that.
Guys, if you're happy to do that, that's brilliant. I mean, I just say to our
let's do it.
People who've got to go, then please do just log out. But if you want to stay on, and we can take a few more questions, that's fantastic. Let's see where we are then.
I'm furloughed.
Yeah, you've got to find one now, haven't you?
That's all right.
Oh, that's where we were before.
Let's whiz through to. There's a few questions about software earlier on.
I know somebody when I was in the middle of the presentation said about, because we use Jotform to send out our online presentation and do the electronic signature. There's a lot of other platforms that do it. We just chose that one because it was cost effective. It did what we needed. There's a mobile app, so if anybody was questioned about whether they'd done it or not, we could get up on our mobile phones, on our smartphones, and see that they'd done it. And it's a really easy platform to use. I'm sure there's other brilliant ones. I'm not sure if you used anything, Tom.
No, I'm going to be asking my staff to have a look at Jotform, so thank you for that. We use a bit more of a different basic system. Yeah, I mean, listen, for us, so we had 4 runners that were meant to go off every 2.5 seconds. Now, listen, let's not get technical here. There were times that, and probably in that video, there might have been certain situations where it was smaller and shorter than others, and if it wasn't as well. This is no different. I was explaining this, you've got shops and pubs and bars open, okay? Their guidance say, everyone's got to be 2 meters apart, 1.5 in certain circumstances. Listen, we're a low risk event. We're outside. We've got a fit and healthy demographic doing our event, okay? Yes, we're going to, and this is what I said to Gavin, I said to our adjudicator, there will be situations where runners will either go off or a volunteer will get things wrong, but we've significantly reduced the risk of contamination through aerosols and everything else. So, that you can't really ask for too much. There's no company in the UK that can 110% guarantee that someone in their shop or someone in their restaurant is going to come within 2 meters of it. You just can't do that. But all this guidance is there to do is to really get us to do our best to help the situation and get back to it. So yeah, so this question sort of relates to that, 15 months
I think
time, we've just got to try and do our best. And yes, they're all going to go off and some will overtake each other quickly. We sort of had a rule that we tried to tell, especially at the start, we had cones out that stopped people from overtaking and sort of going in weird directions. So we tried to sort of channel them in to help keep people apart from 2 meters. Once the race got going, that was something that worked quite well.
Yeah, I mean, I think as well, when we did the half marathon, we've done 2 half marathons since August. 2 hours seems to be a favourite time for people to put down as a finish time. You can have more than one wave containing people that run 2 hours because there's a maximum amount you can put in a wave. So don't be worried if, say, wave 10, wave 11 and wave 12 all contain people that run 2 hours. You've spread them out. So don't worry about that.
Post finish, they left really quickly.
Yeah,
listen,
found the same.
We put a lot of staff right. Again, think of where the pinch points are. Okay, so it's immediately after the finish line, and that was something that Q were really worried about. People finish the race and they're neck and they stop. We created a bit more room at the finish line. I would show you if I could show my map, the sort of thing, but it's not really on the map there. We widened, so coming over the finish line, we widened the section. So rather than keeping people channeled to exit, we widened it because people were going to be on the floor struggling. So we widened it and we just had people that tried to help people move across to the side if they need to get their breath. We were strict on not allowing people. So we had about 10 staff, volunteers, really pushing people through, congratulating them. Water's around the corner, guys, a little white lie, encouraging them to keep moving and that there's an incentive of water around that. We did have water around the corner, but it was maybe 2 corners for them to exit it. So yeah, you've got to try and keep people going and the dwell time's really reduced, okay? And because of that, 4 runners every 2 seconds, it really lengthened out for 2,000 runners. So it really does help. So there was no issues from our point of view.
Yeah, we did the same. We had event team members within the finish area, which we made 2 or 3 times longer than normal, and just kept them walking through. But we had it 5 meters wide throughout the whole finish section. We did ask them to sign a disclaimer. That was on our job form. We asked them to sign that electronically, so we actually had something physically signed, well, electronically signed anyway, which was a 14-day disclaimer that they hadn't had any symptoms on there with a link to the NHS website so that they knew what that was. And because we asked for photo ID when they arrived as well, we could be 100% sure that those who had signed it were the people in attendance.
I will be honest with you guys, we didn't. We looked at it, but once we figured out the reality of having 2,000 runners all signing something, seeing something before the event, so we sort of really sent about 5 emails leading up to it, specific information about what we're doing with our procedures, what you need to do, race rules, and everything else. We had signs as people entered on race day saying with the race rules as they entered. We asked everyone to keep their masks on. We provided extra masks as people arrived as well. So we didn't do that, and again, now for our new event, as people sign up, we have got that, and it's all part of the sort of terms and just letting people know, and people are sort of more open to it now. But again, if I sort of think of us as a shop, we don't sign terms and conditions or disclaimers when you go into Boots in a supermarket, in a normal clothes shop sort of thing. So, we're doing exactly the same thing. And if you've got specific information out for them, then this is no different to any other shop or Kew Gardens being open. Kew Gardens hadn't changed it. They had the rules and they might have emailed it to them, but they didn't have people signing off, listening to certain rules and everything else. So, why are we massively that different to a normal park or normal Kew Gardens on an open day? So that's how we did. I'm not saying I would do exactly the same. First aid,
I can see first aid there. It certainly cost us more money because you have to have a COVID isolation area as well, because in case somebody that you're treating does display symptoms of COVID, you then have to separate them, and you have to have additional personnel to allow for that as well. So simple answer is yes, it does cost more. How much more depends on how many runners basically that you've got in the event. But say if you were doing a club run of 500-600 people, you're probably going to need an extra treatment post at the finish for isolation, and maybe an extra 2 medics for that kind of size. But obviously the bigger the event, the longer the distance, the more that's going to increase as well.
We had 2 isolation stations, as the train guy would say on Twitter. We had one as people entered, and we had signs as they went down Ferry Lane saying, "How are you feeling today? Please do ask our medical, our first aid team about anything about today from from a COVID point of view." We had a tent there. We had temperature guns with them, and people were testing there. It was pretty much a voluntary thing, so we weren't testing temperatures. But I'm also not sure with runners running and walking to your event that the temperature would 100% work. But we encouraged our runners to go and speak to our medical team, and we had an isolation tent at the finish line as per the guidelines, which wasn't used once.
Yeah, I can see one there specifically for me just come up. What were the key things in local authority folks were most interested in sorting out? In terms of the local authorities, a lot of it was, as we've talked about already, in terms of the local authority understanding what a group of runners looks like at your event. So it's not, we had it at the Four Castles where we were saying that, obviously there are a lot of people at the start, but you're saying, well, they're not actually together for that long, because we've spread them out. So it's not like some of them had, like a concert in their minds, or a gig in their minds that, if you've got 2,000 people or 500 people or whatever the number is, that they were all together. And once they entered the event, that was it. There was no way out. And they were just held in this mass gathering, which isn't the case at all. But it was also them understanding. We had on the very first event that we did in August, which was, say, 2nd of August, they said, well, when the runners arrive and they've checked in, what do? And we're like, they go and warm up. They go and do their warm-up protocol. So they'll only actually enter the final start area when they're ready to start. So it was dispelling that myth of there being loads and loads of people together for more than the 15 minutes, which they're not in reality. And just helping them to understand why road running, whether it's on road, trail, whatever, is different to an event they had in their head, and different again to the London Marathon, which everyone's watched on the TV.
For us, the biggest thing with the local authority was access and regress. The regress is really easy once you've really spelt it out, how people are arriving, not encouraging them on public transport, creating more car parks, loads and loads of bullet points. I mean, we had plans that would go and just really just spell out bullet points of all the changes that we're making. It's funny, it's, you know, you spend the local authorities for many years have been asking people to how can they get on public transport, lower our commissions and not arrive by cars. And then suddenly we're like, guys, if you can arrive by cars, this is the year to do it. So it was quite funny with some of the flipping of that sort of thing. But yeah, access there. We'd obviously, I've sort of explained, we had someone else to test our course from the numbers that we were doing it, and he put it through a computer system that would prove it. So people couldn't say, I just don't believe you. It's like, well, listen, here's our proof. And if you, we've got a doctor from Manchester who's already done it and analysed it. So, you know, where's your proof to say that this isn't right? So we sort of did that, and we felt as though we needed something like that, and just to have it there to say, working at our event, we had a lot. We had a lot. It was a 10K event. We had runners on every corner. I think we probably had 200 who were all temperature checked when they arrived. The people that worked, we broke it down. A small tip for your guys on course, we just made sure they had masks. So we didn't give them a full PPE shield, but we also told them things that they can only applaud, and they couldn't shout at runners, because if they're facing runners and they're cheering them on as they normally would. So we gave them signs, and on this sign, it had on one side of it, it said, please social distance. So if they saw a runner that was within 2 meters, they could hold that sign up and say that. And then they could flip it around by saying, you guys are doing amazing, you're looking great. So we sort of worked with it from that point of view. All of our start and finish lines, all of our baggage people had shields across as well from a PPE point of view. Anyone that's facing people for a long time were doing that. So, and that sort of relieved the runners. The runners felt safe once they arrived and they saw that we were taking it seriously. They could relax, and then they worked with us.
Yeah, I think you're right with the PPE. Just, you know, even though you're outdoors, get your staff and volunteers to wear it, because it is about putting the runners at ease and making them feel safe.
Guys, thank you for taking the extra questions. I suspect we could probably be here for another hour or so, but I think we'll wind things up there. If people do want to forward any of the questions, we can tidy those up afterwards. Just one final question from me, really, and you know, I'm conscious that in an ideal world there wouldn't be the extra cost, the extra hassle that's come with, you know, putting on events in a pandemic. But are there any lessons that you guys, or kind of learnings that around things that you would take away as a result of the process of putting on events in a pandemic that you might look to do in the future? You know, is there any good that's come out of it, I guess? You know, anything you might do differently or add in the future?
I think one of the good things that's come from it for us is because we do a lot of events in the year. I mean, we would have done, had it not been for COVID, 35 events this year. So what it has made us do is re-look at every event, even those that we've been doing for a number of years, and to revisit every stage of it. And because we have a lot of events, you don't always revisit every stage of the process of every event. So it's made us do that. The start system, as I said before, I mean, the rolling start that we do, it looks really cool. The runners have really enjoyed that. We'll certainly keep that. And what it has done in some of our locations is where we've got pinch points that are relatively early in the course, we could actually increase the number of people that we have outside of COVID in those races. So we could actually increase the race capacity, but people have just loved that starting system. And I think people also and this will go for a lot of organisers, if they can see the level of care that you've taken, the level of organisation that you've put into it, it will actually help your events in the future, because they can see that you care. They can see the level of organisation that is involved. So it will actually do your race good.
Thanks, Barry.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, loads of things. I think the biggest thing for us, even though we've lost money out of it, Sorry, so I sort of say we broke even, and Jay, my co-race director, sort of corrects me and says, no, we're going to lose money out of this because of various other things. And it's sort of like, well, we're going to lose money out of all of this for a very, very long time compared to how it used to be. For us, the best thing about getting it away, as I said, was we now have a bit more income going into next year with new slots that have created. And I think that's a massive advantage. So if you are able to get something away, even with lower numbers, and you know, yes, there are going to be certain costs that you're going to do, but you're going to save some things. We didn't buy a stage this year. We didn't have, you know, t-shirt printings as well, and our runners were really accepting in terms of how we did certain things. So getting an event, even though it's lower numbers and it's not getting you a profit, if that's the thing that you're very keen to do, it is good, because this is going to be with us for the rest of next year, even with a vaccine. Then there's no way there's going to be a situation that they're going to go, okay, we found a vaccine, let's all stop socially distancing. We've got to get vaccines into people. We've got enough. This is going to be for the whole of next year. So start thinking like that and start really, you know, working on these documents. And that's what we did when they first arrived. This is going to be with us for this year or next spring or the next thing. So start writing your documents early, because because if you're going to hope that this is just going to suddenly disappear and switch off, then I just really don't think we're going to be in a situation. There's going to be, you know, situations where you need to buy Virusol for baggage. And maybe your runners are going to expect it, you know, they're going to expect this health and safety to be with us for a little while, even though the COVID numbers are decreasing and everything else. You know, we can't just stop. So, yeah, so just get on with it, do it, try and do it if you can. It will be difficult with loads of local authorities, but understand what they've got to do from their situation, and try and work with them. But fingers crossed, we'll get more. The more races we get back going, the better and easier it is, because we get to say this event happened and that event happened. So yeah,
guys, thank you for your realism, your positivity, your transparency about, you know, what you did with putting on your events and with the audience. And I think thank you for sharing that. You know, I think there's a comment you made around, you know, being competitors, but actually now more than ever, I think, you know, that sharing of you know, what's possible is good for, you know, events and return to racing for everybody. So, you know, if this has been a useful session for those of you on the call, then we'll probably look to do something similar in the new year, and perhaps bring in examples of other, you know, races and race providers. So if you are one of those and you're interested and you want to get in touch, please do. But you know, do let us know if you found the session useful, and we'll look to do more of these. But thank you for your time. Apologies for the IT issues at the start, but we got there in the end. And my laptop no longer sounds like it's about to take off like a jumbo jet, so that might have had something to do with it. So thank you, Tom, thank you, Barry, and thank you to all of you on the call. And we'll close that down now there, and hopefully be with you in the future. Thanks, guys.
See you, everyone.
Cheers.
And there we go.
Guys, thank you.
That's all right.
Yeah, no, and if anyone